Welcome, dear students, to yet another teaching module in economics. We are doing the topic demand analysis. In this module, we are going to continue with it. Let me just remind you that we have learned about the meaning of demand and quantity demanded. We've learned about the concepts of individual demand schedule and individual demand curve. We've learned about market demand schedule and market demand curve. Later, we also learned about the factors affecting demand and the various types of goods. Today, let me teach you something new. So stay on and let us learn together. Today's lesson is all about the law of demand, the assumptions of the law of demand, the exceptions to the law of demand. So let us begin. Economics is a science, and like other sciences, it also has its laws. Laws of economics are of scientific nature. All scientific laws establish relationships between cause and effect. Economic laws also establish relationship between cause and effect about economic behavior of man and economic phenomena. By observing the behavior of several people, economists have established certain generalizations or general principles which are called economic laws. So here we are going to study a law in economics. That law we call as the law of demand. Let us see what it states. Every law has a statement of the law. The statement of the law of demand is, other things being equal, the quantity demanded varies inversely with price. Or, other things being equal, quantity demanded of a commodity increases with a fall in its own price and decreases when its own price rises. So we see here in the statement of the law, when we studied about individual and market demand curves, we clearly saw that what was true for the individual consumer is also true for the market. And so we see that there is an inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded. And that is what is exactly stated in this law. Other things being equal, the quantity demanded varies inversely with price. Now, I'd just like to explain to you what those other things are. In economics, there is a Latin word that is called ceteris paribus, and it means other things being constant or other things being equal. What are these other things? These other things are the assumptions. We assume certain things before we come down to state our law. And so in the next slide, we are going to study about the assumptions of the law of demand. Well, what are the assumptions of the law of demand? We assume that tastes and preferences, habits and fashions do not change. Second, money income and level of savings of the consumer remain constant. Third, price of related goods must not change. Fourth, there should be no change in future expectations of prices. So given these four assumptions, provided that all these factors do not change or are equal or are constant, then and then only the law will hold good or the law will be true. Let us move on to the next slide. The law of demand can be explained with the following schedule or table. The demand schedule shows the inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded. It shows the extension of demand from 10 to 50 units due to a fall in price from 50 to rupees 10 and the contraction of demand due to a rise in price. In this slide, you can see here the demand schedule, which is a tabular representation of demand of a particular consumer. And here you have the graphical representation of this very same demand schedule. In the demand schedule, we see that as price rises from rupees 10 to rupees 50, quantity demanded falls from 50 units to 10 units. All these are plotted in the diagram. At price rupees 50, 10 units are demanded. At price rupees 40, 20 units are demanded. At price rupees 30, 30 units are demanded. At price rupees 20, 40 units are demanded. And at price rupees 10, 50 units are demanded. The plotted points are joined, and what we get as a result is the demand curve DD. What is true in the schedule is also true in the diagram. As we can see, as the price falls from rupees 50 to rupees 10, quantity demanded extends from 10 units to 50 units. And as price rises from rupees 10 to rupees 50, quantity demanded falls from 50 units to 10 units. Let me now show you how the demand curve diagram has to be explained. First, we state that price is shown on the y-axis and quantity demanded on the x-axis. Let us explain further. The demand curve DD shows that at higher prices, lesser quantities of a commodity are demanded, and at lower prices, greater quantity of the commodity is demanded. The demand curve DD slopes downwards from left to right, showing that the quantity demanded varies inversely with price. This expresses the law of demand. Well, students, here is the left of the diagram, and when we go to the right, that would be the right of the diagram. So we clearly see that the demand curve is sloping downwards from left to right. This shows the inverse relation between price and quantity demanded. What we mean by that? It shows that when price is high, a lesser quantity is demanded, and when the price is lower, a higher quantity is demanded. So this clearly shows us the inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded. Let us move on to the next slide. Before I move on to explaining to you the assumptions of the law of demand and the exceptions of the law of demand, I'd like you students to note that the law of demand explanation must contain the following in this order: the statement of the law. Second, the assumptions have to be stated. Third, the demand schedule has to be given. Next, the demand curve has to be drawn based on the demand schedule. And fifth, the explanation of the demand curve has to be given. Let us move forward. Let me now explain to you the assumptions. The first assumption: tastes and preferences do not change. A change in tastes, preferences, fashions, and habits leads to a change in demand. If these change, the law of demand will not be true or will not hold good. So the law of demand assumes these remain constant. For instance, if at all I change my tastes from tea to coffee, then perhaps I will not buy tea at a lower price even, because I have changed my taste from tea to coffee. So then my law will not hold good, that at lower price I will demand more of tea. Why it will not hold good? Because suddenly I have changed my mind and I have decided that I like coffee now and no longer like tea. So if I have changed my preferences, then I will not buy more tea even if the price of tea is less. So it will go against the law of demand. So if my law is going to be true, then tastes, preferences, habits, fashions must not change. They must be constant. The second assumption is money income and level of savings remains constant. A change in the money income leads to a change in demand. Higher the income, more the demand. Lesser the income, lower the demand. Example, if income rises, the consumer may buy more even at higher prices. So for the law of demand to be true, it is assumed that income does not change. Let me give you another example. Suppose a person has earned some more income. Even though fruits are expensive in the market, he still buys more fruits, even at a higher price, for the simple reason that his income might have increased. This goes totally contrary to the law of demand that says at higher prices, less is demanded. So for the law to be true, we must assume that income remains constant, so that at higher prices, less is demanded, and at lesser prices, more is demanded. The third assumption of the law of demand is there should be no expectations of future prices. If there are expectations that the price or prices will change in the near future, it may have an effect on the demand for a commodity at present. For example, if petrol prices are expected to rise in the future, the consumer demands more petrol at present. Thus, the law of demand assumes that there are no expectations with regards to the future prices. Let us take the same example of petrol again. If we expect that prices tomorrow will rise and prices today are quite high, still we will demand more of petrol now in the present because we expect that prices in the future are going to rise even more further. So if the law is to be true, that at higher prices less is to be demanded and at lesser prices more is to be demanded, then we must have no expectations of future change in prices. The fourth assumption of the law of demand is price of related goods must remain constant. If price of related goods, like that of substitute and complementary goods, changes, the demand for the commodity will also be affected. Example, if price of coffee rises, the consumer will shift his demand for tea, which is its substitute. So, the law of demand assumes that the price of related goods must remain constant. If the price of related goods changes, then the demand for the good we are talking about may not go according to the law of demand. The consumer may not behave according to the law of demand simply because the price of the substitute good has changed. So the consumer's behavior will change accordingly and it may not go according to the law of demand. So if the law is to be true, then the price of related goods must be assumed to be constant or same. There should be no change in the price of substitute or complementary goods. Having learnt about the assumptions or what we are to assume for the law of demand to be true, let us now go on to study some of the exceptions to the law of demand. There are some commodities whose demand increases when their price rises and decreases when the price falls. In this case, the demand curve will have a positive slope. Hello, did you realize what we have read here just now is not according to the law? It is totally contrary to the law of demand. There are some cases or exceptions where the law of demand will not hold good and not be true. In the following slides, we will study about those exceptions where when the price rises, the demand is more, and when the price falls, the demand also falls. These cases will be the exceptions to the law of demand. The first exception to the law of demand is articles of distinction. They are also called as prestige goods. An economist, Veblen, was the first to identify articles of distinction. According to him, articles of distinction have more demand only if their prices are high. Example, diamonds, jewelry, luxury cars, and so on. It is so because society bestows distinction on these goods because they are costly. So their demand is high. If their prices fall, they will no longer be prestige goods. So often we see people buying very expensive cars like BMWs, Audis and so on the roads. Perhaps they want to show their status to people. And even though these cars are so costly, still people demand them as a show of their status. So in these cases, the law of demand will not be true, because the law of demand says at a higher price, less will be demanded. But in the case of luxury cars, diamonds and costly jewelry or branded clothes, people seem to buy more because they are costly. So it totally goes against the law of demand. So these are therefore articles of distinction are therefore exceptions to the law of demand. The second exception to the law of demand is ignorance. Sometimes, due to ignorance, consumers feel that a good is worthless when the price is low. Accordingly, they buy less of it at a lower price, and more of it is purchased only if the price is high. There are many of us who think that way, that a low price good means low quality and a higher priced good means the quality is high. It may not always be necessarily true, but there is some kind of a feeling that consumers have, and if they have this kind of feeling, then when the price is low they will buy less of it, and when the price is high they may buy more of it. So therefore this becomes an exception to the law of demand. Why does it become an exception? Because the law of demand says that at a high price less is demanded and at a low price more is demanded. But here in the case of ignorance, when a consumer feels that a low price good means low quality, then he will buy less of it. The third exception to the law of demand is Giffen's goods. What are Giffen's goods? Giffen's goods are those goods whose price effect is positive and income effect is negative. Positive price effect means demand falls with a fall in price and demand rises with a rise in price. An economist, Sir Robert Giffens, analyzed this, so it is called a Giffen's paradox. Why it is called a paradox? Because what we normally expect to happen with the case of most goods doesn't happen in the case of Giffen's goods. In most normal goods, we see that at high prices less is demanded and at lesser price more is demanded. But in the case of Giffen's goods, the price effect is positive, which means more is demanded at a high price and less is demanded at a lesser price. And the income effect is negative, which means when the consumer's income is more, he will demand less of this good, and when the consumer's income is less, he will demand more of this good. Well, in Great Britain, where Robert Giffens comes from, potatoes would be in abundance. So people in UK in the olden days would buy less potatoes when their income would rise, and they would buy more potatoes when their incomes would fall. And he noticed this. And so his study or his observation of Giffen's goods is called as Giffen's paradox. It is named after him. These goods are named after Sir Robert Giffens. In this lesson, we have learnt about the law of demand, the assumptions of the law of demand, and the exceptions of the law of demand. In the next slide, I have a little question and answer session for you. So let us move on. So children, here is a short Q&A section for you. The first question, fill in the blank, is Giffen's goods are price dash and income dash. Giffen's goods are price positive and income negative. Articles of distinction are also called dash. Articles of distinction are also called prestige goods. The third one, the exception of the law of demand, where the consumer feels that lower the price of the good, lowers the demand, and vice versa, is dash. The exception of the law of demand, where the consumer feels that lower the price of the good lowers the demand and higher the price, higher the demand, is ignorance. Which of the following is not an assumption of the law of demand? The first option, taste and preferences. Second, expectations of future prices. Third, price of related goods. And fourth, price of the good itself. The answer is price of the good itself. We have now come to the end of this teaching module. I hope you have grasped and understood everything that is explained in the video. Well, if you really want to understand it better, then I would encourage you to watch it again. Thank you and God bless you all.